You know, I'm not much of a card player, but they say the game of bridge is like sex. If you don't have a good partner, at least you better have a good hand. Five, four, three. Hey, Trekkers, and welcome to another episode of Trek Tonight. We are very excited because this is episode 9. We are coming down to the end of Picard season 3, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about tonight. But before we get into that, I want to, number one, welcome our dear friend Keith Jacobson. Keith, how are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, we are thrilled to have you. Angela is here
Angela!
with us. Hi, guys. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Thank you, Angela.
Good to have you here. Now, folks, as I've said, we are going to be talking about this episode. So, spoiler alert: if you have not seen it, you may want to turn us off, as sad as that would be, and go watch the episode and then come back and enjoy all the conversation we're going to have tonight. Wow, guys. Okay, I don't want to crow, but did I not say the big bad had to be the Borg?
You did?
Yep, there we go. That is why I'm listed as Karnak the Magnificent, because I saw that. But anyway, we have a lot of things that I think we all picked at over the course of this season that we some came true, some didn't. General impressions, guys. Let's go with Keith.
General impression. Fantastic episode. I loved it. My nerd heart grew 2 sizes larger. I was fucking bawling at one point during that show. They, some people say fans. I don't know. Some people have complained about the show because there's too much fan service. I think there's exactly the right amount of fan service, because that fan service today in this episode got me right in the feels.
Oh yeah. There's a little bit of fan service I want to talk about later, but yeah, that's true. And of course, you are listed as the Angel of Death, Keith. Do you want to explain that?
Yes, they hammered my favorite character this episode. I keep getting attached to characters.
Yes.
And then Paramount, in their infinite wisdom, kills them off. Therefore, if you want to have a career past season 1, I gotta hate you.
Yeah,
I gotta hate
exactly. You. Don't let Keith become your fan if you want to stay on the show.
Well, don't be his favorite character, because I would say that you like the rest of the characters in Strange New Worlds. You didn't dislike any of them.
I did not dislike any of them.
Right.
But
Hammer was your favorite.
Hammer was my favorite. And by the way, should we have done a spoiler warning for anyone who has not seen Strange New Worlds? Because
that was out a year ago. I think we had a spoiler alert at the beginning. I think legally we're covered.
Yeah, I think we got it covered. Yeah.
I quite enjoyed this episode. I do like the fan service they've had in this season, because sometimes fan service can be a little overdone. But I do like the idea that it makes it feel like you're living in a universe where stuff that's happened in the past can, show up in the future. People you've met before, characters showing up.
Oh, sure.
There's quite a bit of it this episode. I have no problems with any of them. I thought it was terrific. heartbreaking at times, but ultimately, this is about getting the band back together.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
And they very much are by now.
Mike Robbins says we need more red shirts to dispose of. See, this is the problem, Mike. When the command guys started wearing red, it threw everybody under the bus. So
Yes.
yeah. I mean, quite frankly, let's face it, he was wearing a red shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. He
So
was.
hey, yeah, all's fair in love and Trek. At any rate, okay, so we start out this episode diving right in where we left off about Jack. Now, how did you guys feel about that counselor session? Anybody, Leo?
No, it was good because we didn't know what. I mean, we had our suspicions, but
Right.
finally, like, she's got her her empathy and her low level sort of telepathy, and she can go in his mind and help him sort of work through these things.
Right.
And I liked it. I liked it because he was reluctant. She's like, and he's going off on stuff, and he's talking about the Arboretum on Raritan 4 or 5.
Yep.
Raritan, also a town in New Jersey where Terry Metalis was born. So
I was wondering about Raritan. I was wondering where that came from. Okay, sounds good.
So I quite enjoyed it. It built up the tension. It didn't just blow it all in one big thing.
Right. Yeah. I thought it was good. Now, the interesting twist, of course, is when she realizes who he's seeing behind the door, it all of a sudden enables Starfleet protocols for security.
Yes.
Sure.
And as she says to Jean-Luc, he's gone from being your son to being potentially dangerous.
Yes.
So how do you guys feel about that? I mean, those Starfleet, because I love the moment where he says, and it's very cutting, where he says, how about protocols for a father? Did they distribute those to you?
Yeah. It's a tough call because you realize your kid, who you didn't even realize existed, like it's been less than a week, really, I think, in Showtime.
Right.
He didn't know he had a son with his old, I wouldn't say Beverly's the love of his life, but this sort of on again, but somebody who's very close with.
Right.
And so now he knows I'm a dad. And,
right.
At first he thought he had aromatic syndrome, which it turns out was leftover Borg nonsense.
Yes.
From when he was Locutus.
Yeah.
And now he suddenly has to be like, there are protocols, because if somebody is dangerous, especially, I'm sure they must have a lot of rules regarding potential Borg, shenanigans.
Yeah, well, and I mean, basically their option is send him off to a nut house on Vulcan, which, by the way, John Van Gustine is here. John.
Hi,
good
John.
evening, gentlemen. Good to see you. Also, Scott Taylor gave us a thumbs up. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
As well as John, but John also said good evening. It's a tough spot to be in, wouldn't you say?
It is, and he's trying to be as nice as you could possibly be. Where like, we're gonna have to sort of take precautions. And he said, for protection. And he's like, who? He says, everybody else.
Right.
And he's not wrong. Because they still don't know what the deal is. They've also found out that Jack is a transmitter, whereas his old body allowed him to be a receiver. If you remember in Star Trek First Contact, he kept getting sort of these messages from the Borg Queen, if you recall.
Right.
But, they've definitely decided to monkey around with his DNA in case something happened, and it did. And so Jack is now the voices he heard in his head. He thought it was his mom. Turns out it's the Borg Queen.
Yes, but not our Borg Queen from last season. Huh?
No, not Agnes Girardi, and but those Borg are from a different timeline, pretty much.
Okay.
I
Yeah, you're
think.
right. See, that's
Um,
what I was trying to wrap my head around. And, I probably should have gone back and looked at I knew this was happening. I might do this later tonight. And looked at the end of last season because I was left scratching my head thinking, okay, well, where are those Borg? These aren't the
yeah, I
same
don't
Borg.
know. That's a
Really.
good question.
They're not the I believe they're still in the whatever the current Picard timeline is. They
Right.
Girardi Borg and Evil Borg Queen, for lack of a better name, I think are two competing collectives. I think that's what I
Possibly.
think is going on.
Yeah, possibly.
So,
And then maybe that's what we'll talk about predictions later
Yeah.
in the show. But yeah, it was interesting. And then, Jack goes and grabs the two security guards that were supposed to keep him in his room. And
and by the
basically
way, don't you think that was an incredibly bad plan on their point of view? I mean, Jack has already demonstrated that he can take over people. So, hey, here's a meat pup.
yeah,
Here's two meat puppets for you.
I
Knock
think
yourself out.
I think it's also new to them, Keith. They just weren't thinking about it, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Like come in and like, stun him with a phaser, just like
Yeah.
without, treat him
I
like.
mean, yeah. Well, I mean, and it's true. They're walking a fine line because they don't want to all of a sudden treat him like
Sure.
he's the big bad because he's been helping them all along.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and he's Picard's son and Beverly's son. So you want to protect him, but on the other hand, you're not sure what the Borg is going to do through him.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where you're stuck, and I get that.
He decides that it's time to go confront the Borg Queen.
Right.
Maybe not the best plan.
But very much a Jack plan. I will say.
I would say like he's very much the kind of guy who's like, I'm just going to do it myself. And he's like, I'm going to, find out what she wants. And then basically, tell her to go.
Well, and what Jean-Luc tries to say to him, and rightly so. And I'm really happy that they're delving into all of this stuff with Jean-Luc, because in The Next Generation, it to me kind of got soft soaped a little bit.
Yeah.
After he got rescued and he came back, he had an episode, maybe one, maybe two, where he seemed like, he was struggling with it. And then poof, it was gone and it was back to Trek as usual. And so I'm glad to see they're letting the character talk about his feelings about it, which is great. And as he says to Jack, you have no idea what they can make you do. I was going to kill all of the people I love.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically
Yeah. That's what he says.
So, yeah, scary shit. Scary stuff. PG 14. 14, TV 14.
I think we're allowed to say shit with the.
Yeah, we are. TV 14. Okay. Yes.
So, and he takes off in a shuttlecraft. I mean, I guess they couldn't like override it, although it feels like something they should do, but it doesn't serve the story if they stop him. He disengages the transponder so they can't track him. They can't track him, but you think that by the time he's heading towards the shuttle bay, you think they might Picard might be like, hey, turn off, disable the transporters to, shut down the shuttle bay.
Shaw would have.
Yeah, I think he would have. Yeah. Shaw would have done a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
But
that's what we can say now. We can say, what would Shaw have done? Yeah.
But now they're stuck, and they're like, well, what are we going to do? They also find out that they've established a maybe I think this happens a little later, but Geordi, Beverly, and Data are all trying to figure out what's going on with the why did they want this DNA? Because they removed part of his brain, the Picard's old body.
Right.
And they're like, what are they doing with that? Also, there's a wonderful moment with Data and Picard after, he and Beverly watched Jack, fuck off into space. And, Picard sits down at the table and puts his hand in his head, and Data comes in and he's like, this is a time, would you like me to say something comforting? He says, I believe that would be impossible. And he has a very nice moment where he just puts his hand on his shoulder, and Picard like does that, and I was like,
and he
that's a lovely
smiled.
little.
And it was a neat moment because it was like, he's learned that there's really nothing to say, but to make human contact like that is worth more.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
I'm really enjoying the new and improved Data.
Yes, I agree.
He still seems like Data, but better.
Yeah, and the fact that he could have that, like the old Data would be like, I read on many occasions that physical contact is a comfort to humans, although I do not understand it myself.
Yes, right.
But he does understand, like, because he's fused with Sung and Lore and Lal, who they keep forgetting about, and before and all that stuff. So he's beginning to understand feelings, and it was a lovely moment.
It was very nice.
And hats off to Brent Spiner, who's played many different iterations of androids and songs over the years to be able to still find new things to bring to the table.
Right.
So,
okay. So they realize they have to get to but I'm trying to remember. Do they figure out the Borg technology first, and that's why they realize they have to get to Earth, or is it the other way around?
I think it's the other way around.
I don't think we ever actually said, we got sidetracked with Data.
Yes.
We never actually said what they were doing with Picard's DNA.
Yeah, they're basically lacing everybody with biological receivers.
Right.
And
they get implanted using the transporter, which is why Vatic, I'm sure, did not want to use the transporter.
Right.
So that's there. You get that clue is there.
Or Commander Rowe didn't use transporter. She came over by shuttle.
Right.
So,
right.
And if you recall, there was an early episode where Jack is watching people. I think it was the same episode. People are beaming out. And he sees like weird, sort of almost like those tendrils like you saw in the corridor.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yep.
So they've been basically incorporating that. So anybody who uses a transporter gets a big old dose of Picard DNA, aka Borg nonsense.
Right.
And as a result, they can be used to assimilate them. But the key thing is, and very much in line with the rest of the show, is about 24. There's a certain point where the brain stops evolving, according to Dr. Crusher, around 25 years old for humans.
Right.
So anybody who's older than 25 cannot be assimilated. That it won't work on them.
Yeah.
But the young strapping crew of the Titan suddenly will start to find that things are not going their way,
which lends credence. It lends credence to the fear of every old person that young people are going to kill me.
Yeah. As Fish said once on Barney Miller. So I watched a movie last night about young people turning old people into crackers. Deep Barney Miller cut.
Yeah, Barney Miller cut. Yeah.
But so they head to Frontier Day, and
hang on. Angela wants to jump in and say Commander Rose said that she did not trust the guy who ran the transporter.
It's a solid suspicion there, Ro.
Yeah.
Those damn transporters.
Yes. Yeah, good old
Those damn transporters. They have been the cause of more problems for Starfleet. I mean, you got transporter clones running. God knows how many transporter clones are running around the Federation right now.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet, a measurable percentage of the population of the Federation is a transporter clone.
Yeah.
Except
if one Boimler is good, two is better.
Yeah. Listen, they also, it seems like shuttle accidents seems to be the leading cause of death.
Yeah.
Because anytime you hear about somebody who died like off screen, like somebody's parent or somebody was like, oh, it was a shuttle accident, it was tragic. maybe take another look at those shuttles, engineering corps. So anyway, so they back at Earth, Frontier Day is starting out, and the Enterprise F, which is based on a design for the Star Trek Online game,
Right.
Which I played a little bit of. I never got close to getting anything that cool.
Yeah, me neither.
But it is commanded by Admiral Shelby, if you recall, Commander Shelby from Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
The young up-and-comer who was a tactical expert and was gunning for Riker's job, played by Elizabeth, I'm going to say Elizabeth, I may be wrong, Dennehy, Brian Dennehy's daughter. Now,
I thought she looked great, by the way.
She looked great. She'd gotten rid of that 90s perm she'd been sporting back in the day. So, yes, she was terrific. And she's commanding the Enterprise that's coming out of space dock. And they're talking about how it's this great innovation. And they have this thing they can link the fleet up for maneuvers. I believe it's called Fleet Maneuvers. And they're listening to the transmission on the Titan. And of course, Picard is like, it's rather ironic here touting something so Borg-like. And Riker gets a little salty with her, because he was not, why he admired her skill. He didn't particularly care for her as a person.
Right.
Back in the day.
Right.
So he's still a little salty. Fair enough. But, and there's, fireworks in space, which is why not? It looks cool. Like, let's not.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know. I didn't really.
Space, so
I didn't really understand how that worked without oxygen, but we won't go there. I mean,
listen, stuff blows up in Star Trek all the time. So I mean, the oxygen on a ship probably would be eaten up almost immediately. So it looks cool, and let's just accept that.
Right.
And the fleets are all moving together, and he interrupts with a live broadcast saying, like, Picard starts warning everybody. And then everything just starts going to hell.
Right.
People start getting assimilated. You see Shelby being shot by one of her ensigns or one of her junior officers.
Right.
And it's
the bridge crew of the Titan. Bridge crew of the Titan starts to go. First you lose the navigation and then the helm. Uh-oh. Hey, Leo, we can't hear you, buddy.
No, fair.
No. Okay, he's going to leave and come back in.
Fair enough. All righty then.
But yeah. It was. I will say I did stop and pause a bit about fireworks in space, but
I just rode with it.
I know. Well, it looked cool. As Leo says, it looked cool. And I thought it was really interesting, and I'm sort of jumping ahead here a tiny bit, but what did you think once the Borg took control of the fleet of that very odd formation that the ships all went into?
I did have to look at that formation, and I did kind of scratch my head trying to figure out what the function of it was. But but it certainly did look. Yeah, and we heard that.
And we hear you, Leo. So you're good. You're back.
I got a spam call because I'm doing this via my phone, and for some reason that turned off my sound.
Okay.
Why not?
Briefly, while you were gone, we were talking about the. It is jumping ahead a tiny bit, but the formation the fleet takes once the Borg take control of it was very interesting.
It was. There were like these circles and sort of like, I didn't recognize. You know what? I think it looked a little like, if you recall, when you would see like readouts on a Borg cube or any kind of Borg tech, they had those sort of circles and lines, and it was that sort of weird geometric pattern. I think that's what it was doing. And there may be somebody out there who's deciphered what that means. It is not, those people are not here right now.
No, if anybody has a clue, let us know.
Yeah.
Angela says time to make the crackers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, I'm trying to think. So
So shit
all right.
goes down on. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So at any rate, so they all of a sudden realize that these younger people who have been assimilated are not going to let them just wander around.
No.
They're basically have an order to eliminate anyone that could not be assimilated.
Right.
And so now our heroes are under the gun, literally, and they're in two separate places. You've got the bridge crew, which was Jean-Luc, Riker, Shaw, and Seven.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you have Geordi and
Data and Dr. Crusher.
Right. Down in
And
engineering or the sick bay.
They were in some sort of lab.
Okay. All right.
I'm gonna get.
And
sick
Worf and Rafi,
Yeah.
who do show up eventually. I'm not sure where they were, but they do end up rendezvousing. But as they're going down in the turbo lift, there's a display screen showing the placement of all the ships. And one ship is like the captain is like, "Hey, we reestablished control of the bridge. I don't know what's going on." And then suddenly we're like, "Oh no, we're being taken out of formation." And basically, they're blown up by
every other ship in the fleet blows them up. Yeah.
And that's the Excelsior, which is destroyed.
Right.
Now, I read somewhere, you recall, Eleanor was serving on the Excelsior. But I was under the impression that Eleanor, because he died in the past, Q didn't like magically bring him back to life, as far as I know.
Right.
Because we never really got to see him other than as the hologram, which was cool, but kind of disappointing for the actor. I'm not sure if he died here or in the past.
Lulu and Luna's workshops. Penny says hi.
Hello.
I can
Hi,
only
Penny.
assume that is my daughter Charlotte and Penny.
Yes.
I'm not sure who Lulu and Luna's workshops are, but I think it's her and her friend who design and code video games. So.
Oh, nice.
Yes. At any rate, so hello to you and hello to Penny.
Yes.
Any rate, yeah. So now you've got them sort of scrambling to figure out what they're going to do, and I guess they realize they have to get to who is it who comes up with the idea?
It was Shaw, because Shaw said we need take us to maintenance. The maintenance level says there are no drones, and there should be a repair shuttle there,
right,
that we could use,
right, because that won't be linked in for some reason.
Yeah. Well, also as we find out later, there's when they all get together, all our titular characters or our main characters are finally reunited, and Data's somebody says, "Oh, can we use the shuttle?" And Data says, "Well, they're autonomous. They're not linked into the great sort of starship collective."
Right.
And then 7 of 9 goes, "The robot's right," and Data has this kind of slightly offended look.
Yeah.
But it was a great take from Brent Spiner, and a great throwaway line.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to open up the door so they can get through onto the shuttle. Then more assimilators show up, and it becomes a pitched phaser battle.
Yep. And you just darn knew the minute that Shaw is there being large and in charge saying, "Okay, Riker, go. Okay, Picard, go." You knew he was going to bite it. I don't know. I just did. I knew. Oh, damn it. We're going to lose Shaw.
Yes, Shaw. Rest in peace, Mon Capitan.
Oh, my gosh.
They hammered him.
They hammered him, but he had heroic death.
Yes.
He didn't slip in the shower. He didn't
he didn't fall off a bridge like Kirk did. Shaw goes, Angela says Shaw goes from being passive aggressive to Picard to sacrificing himself for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he also he says to 7 of 9, says 7 of 9, the ship is yours.
Yeah, which I thought was great. I mean,
which
what
is
a
great,
great
because he finally acknowledges her as a person, or as how she wants to, let's say she's seen in that moment.
Right.
But it is sad. And this is just sort of a side note. I've noticed this in Picard. phaser shots tend to be like in I think next gen and going forward, phasers mostly like sort of like, seem to have almost a concussive force.
Right.
People get knocked down,
Right.
and so on. But these phasers are leaving like these deep burn craters in flesh.
They're a lot more
I'm
like
not sure if
disruptors.
worse or better than being, vaporized.
I don't know.
Incinerated.
They are a lot more like disruptors in a way. Yeah.
And he gets one right in the old heart, and there's a chance he's not dead, but it seems unlikely. If you recall from the very end of Picard season 1, which had its problems, but when because Picard was very ill, and they were like he died, and you see Rafi and Rios drinking this really shitty. There's only one kind of booze on the planet they're on.
Yeah,
and it's terrible, but they're going to drink it anyway.
Yeah, and
Eleanor is just like breaking down, because he was like a father to him. And then the next thing you were like, oh, they put me in a golem, and I felt like, because
I know that really irritated you. I remember that how much that irritated.
Because it's such a fake out, and they really there wasn't like that moment where like, okay, we've lost him, but we have that thing. We sort of sat with our grief, probably only a matter of minutes, but it felt like, and also it felt like, well, if this is the end of Picard's journey, it's like he helped save things, and it was not an unsatisfying, final chapter.
Right.
But then, but they wanted to do more. They either had planned to do more seasons, or they, or decided at a certain point.
Right.
And it felt like a bit of a cheat. So I think as much as I love Shaw, and I say that partially because he's a friend of mine, and I hate to see him miss out on the opportunity to
do more Trek,
to captain a new series.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. There's always a way to write.
There's a way, but I almost feel if they bring him back, it would lessen his sacrifice narratively.
It would. Yes, it would. It would.
But
I actually thought it was a great moment for the character. I'm just sorry to see him go. That's all.
Same here. So what can I say? I mean, when they took out Hemmer in Strange New Worlds, even though I was mad about the fact that he was gone, he went out great. Shaw went out great, and I like Shaw's final line of you have the con 7 of 9. So
yeah, right. Yeah, no, it was a really great moment. Hey guys, let's take a little break for commercials, and then we will get back with the end of the program.
I'm Chris, and this is Anna with MCI. She recently started a great friends and family calling circle.
A group of friends that wanted to get back in touch.
I believe I actually said we should resume communicating.
So Anna called, and I signed up.
And Chris called me. I thought if anybody belongs in friends and family, it's us.
I used to get tired of staring at those faces. Now I kind of miss them.
I joined to save the 20% because when I call him, I end up talking to an answering machine, which is more interesting than he is.
I'm usually home. I'm just selective about the calls I take.
When they were forming the circle, they obviously saved the best for last.
Oh, that's why she called me next.
Who is that?
How did you get in there?
There seems to be some error.
I believe you were in the wrong circle.
Call and start saving an extra 20% on calls to your own friends and family circle.
Every week, thousands of people join the millions who already have MCI friends and family. If you'd like to be one of them, give us a ring. After all, shouldn't your least expensive calls be to the people you care about and call all the time?
You're invited to engage your senses, transport your spirit, and boldly go where no one has gone before. The 24th century is coming to the Las Vegas Hilton. Star Trek: The Experience. Feel the excitement as you beam up to the bridge of the Enterprise. Travel through space and time aboard a Starfleet shuttlecraft. And dock at the alien outpost Deep Space Nine for the finest in dining and shopping. Make your plans to be among the first in the galaxy to beam up to 24th century adventure. Star Trek: The Experience. Coming soon to the Las Vegas Hilton.
Reverse thrusters.
Hailing frequencies open.
Scotty, we need more power.
I can't hold it much longer, Captain.
We're losing the Colonel's signal, sir.
Well, what was Spock's order?
His usual, Captain. The two-piece combo.
Okay, give me a two-piece combo.
Aye, sir.
No, wait. Make it 3 pieces. Leave them up, Scotty. Status report.
Close call, Captain. Almost lost the coleslaw on that one.
Captain's log, stardate 2453.87. The crisis was averted. Our cravings satisfied. The chicken was excellent.
Take us out of here, Mr. Sulu. Warp factor 2. Hey, who took my fries?
Now I want Kentucky Fried Chicken.
But you know what else I want to do?
What?
I want to dial that number 1-800-3-BEAM-UP and see if it's still active and what happens. So,
is MCI even a thing?
I don't know, but I've got that number programmed into my phone. I'm about to dial it and see what we get. Hold on a second.
Here we are.
Let's see here. Come on. Is anything happening? Oh, there we go. Two ringies? 3 rings? I don't think we're getting it. I don't think that number is even active anymore.
Oh.
Thank you for calling Dadco. Our office is closed at this time.
Dadco?
If you'd like to leave a message in our company mailbox, please press 0.
All right. Dad call? Is that who they said they were?
Dad call. I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
We'll have to look that up. Hey, didn't you think that the casting was surprisingly good in that Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial?
It was because they were lip syncing it, and it was like it was just dark enough that you could sort of like forgive the fact that it wasn't the actual actors.
Right, but I thought that Scotty especially was
he was the best, I think.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
but it is. It's funny because the year that the Star Trek Experience was closing. Maybe it was, I don't know the Star Trek Experience, but they do a big Star Trek convention in Las Vegas every year. And I tried to get years ago, Chris and Craig, I'm like, do you want to go? And they couldn't do it. And I didn't want to go by myself.
Right.
So we missed out on that opportunity to go.
I know. And actually, I think there is a Facebook page called Rebuilding the Enterprise D. And it's a group out in California that has a original set of the bridge. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it's the one from the show or from the attraction, but they actually were contacted by Paramount when they did what they did later in this episode. And it turned out that the pieces were all built out of fiberglass and therefore were too heavy to ship. So they ended up doing their own thing. But they originally contacted these guys. But at any rate, they have like motion rides from that. And they were, at one point, somebody offered them, there was an enormous 22-foot Voyager that hung from the ceiling that's still around. And they were offered that, but they had no place to store it. And somebody else got it. I don't know what the story is, but check out their Facebook page. It's called, I'll put a link on our Facebook page. But it's interesting because they're doing a full restoration of the Enterprise D bridge. And right now, I think the most recent post was saying they're looking for computer guys who could help them design a system to run all of the screens because they don't have that, I guess, with it. They just have the physical set and the screens. And so they're looking for somebody to help create a computer program to do that. So anyway,
there was they had an exhibition at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia a number of years ago. It was around 2009 because it was right when the J.J. Abrams film had come out, and they a Star Trek exhibition, and they had sort of not a full Enterprise D bridge, but sort of like kind of a smaller version of it, and a lot of props and stuff. And you could take a picture in Captain Kirk's chair, which of course I did.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I kind of wonder with this plethora of Trek, and we talked a little bit about this in the green room, but I'm going to throw it out to the audience to get your opinion, whether we would see some sort of an attraction pop up somewhere. Leo had suggested that maybe it would just be something that would travel, but I think it would be really cool with all of the new Trek that we have to have some sort of a place to go that would be a Star Trek.
Listen, if they had a Star Trek museum, I'm first online, man.
Yeah, I mean something akin to what Disney did with Star Wars.
Yeah,
kind of neat. So, but at any rate, Paramount doesn't have any attachment to a park, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But it'd be neat. It'd be really cool. I would go definitely. Anyway, all right. I guess we should get back to the story. We are so we've got them all leaving, and they get to the museum. And we finally see what we were hoping we'd be promised, what was in Hangar 12.
Yes.
And yes.
So first off, I remember at one point I had predicted that it would be the new Enterprise in the hangar, Enterprise F.
Right.
Once we saw Enterprise F on parade with the fleet, I knew that wasn't what was going to be in the Hangar 12.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Now I will say, this is where, we always say that you come to wherever you come to Trek, that's your starting point.
Yeah.
People who came to TOS first, that's their home base. People who come to Next Generation first, that's their home base. I will say that bringing back the Enterprise D was probably more exciting to certain segments of the fan base than it was for me.
Well, here's the thing. The Enterprise D is not my favorite Enterprise.
Right.
But I have to say, seeing the original crew on the bridge of the Enterprise D was just perfect.
Yeah.
Because part of it is it's not tied into the whole fleet,
Right.
let's slave all these ships together,
right?
So we can be taken over by the Borg. But the fact is, it was just like them coming home, which was, and they had Majel Barrett's voice as the computer,
right?
And it felt right. It felt like coming home, and
now did you guys catch the joke? And I know this, I'm pretty sure this joke was an inside joke based on interviews I've seen with Frakes talking about the set of the Titan. Because the set of the Titan is really huge and is much bigger than the set for the Enterprise D, believe it or not, which always seemed very big.
Yes.
So I thought that line from Riker where he says, does this seem smaller or is it just me? Was an inside joke about that. I mean, I could be wrong.
It's partially, but it's also the idea when you come home, you remember your house being so big, and then suddenly,
Right.
You
So-
know, Keith, you had something to say?
Oh, yeah. One, you're absolutely right, Leo. The Enterprise D was never my favorite Enterprise. First, it was, again, just like you were saying, Chris, I came into Star Trek back with Kirk and Spock, and the original, the TOS Enterprise was my Enterprise. I always thought, and I think you were the one who I heard first put this into words like that, even though it's in space and that doesn't matter, it always looked like the Enterprise D was just too front heavy and was just going to fall over forward. That said, when we saw when they lit up those letters on the Enterprise D, I started.
I'm doing the show
bawling.
now.
I started.
I'm doing something.
I started crying. Tears are streaming down my face, and then we're walking around. We're seeing the and we get ship porn, and I'm all over the ship porn, and it was fantastic. Furthermore, I said something I believe in last week's show in the comments.
Right.
I was wrong.
Which is?
The moment I was referring to in last week's show didn't happen. I think in the comments I said last week that that when the crew of the Enterprise D got together and sat around the table, that was the moment the bad guys lost. They just didn't know it. I was wrong.
Yeah. Well,
because there was one crew member missing.
Yeah.
And we got that crew member this week's show. We got the Enterprise D. Now the band is back together.
Yeah.
Now the bad guys have lost. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah, we got the fat one back, which is great.
It's also, if you noticed at the end when it's taking off.
Yeah.
And it looks very much like that painting that was hanging at Chateau Picard.
Yes.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I think it's almost the same angle. I agree with you, Leo. I think that's a cool thing.
And I was thinking while I was driving my bus today is I should have seen it coming. Because in the very first episode of this season, we hear Picard looking at that painting, talking about he's commanded lots of ships, but that one's his favorite.
Right.
If that wasn't Chekhov's Enterprise, I don't know what was.
Yeah.
No, I listen again. Like I said, Enterprise D. I agree with Keith. It always looks like it's about to tip over because it's so front heavy.
Right.
That being said, that is their ship.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that they get to go back. And I love Worf says the Enterprise E had better technical systems. And I think it was like Deanna was like, Worf. He says, Geordi, it is perfect. But there's also a thing apparently, and I think I'm not sure whether this is from the books because a lot of this stuff is sort of apocryphal. I'm not sure how canonical it is, but Worf commanded the Enterprise E for a period. And because when they're coming up on the museum, and somebody said, "Well, we sure can't use the Enterprise E," and they all sort of turn around and give Worf a bit of the stink eye. He says, "It was not my fault."
Yeah.
So something has happened to the Enterprise E. I'm not sure what it is.
Right.
I want to know that story.
Yeah, I do too.
Although I it's like one of those things that it's almost better that you don't explain it. Much like when Worf, they were like, the Klingon scene in the Trials and Tribulations, and they're like, those are Klingons and you're Klingons. So what's there? He says, it is a long story, which is to me ultimately more satisfying than trying to explain it.
Oh, sure.
Just like I just love the idea that something terrible happened while he was captain, and the ship is no longer functional.
Yeah.
But nobody there has a right because they crashed that ship right into a planet.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, for all of my comments about the E, this is my unfinished Eagle Moss USS Enterprise D. So, I mean, I went and ordered this thing. So, yeah. I mean, clearly, I do have some nostalgia for it. But
listen, it was a very beige ship.
Yes. Yeah, and I will say that is in going back and looking at, everybody gives TOS a lot of shade because they say, oh, it looks very dated. But in some ways, that holds up better to me than the very 90s design of the interior of the Enterprise D. It just, it speaks that time period as well. And I guess it's not an interior design concept that I like as much. So,
I mean, I think it also goes back to what you said before. Whatever your first Star Trek is, that's your Star Trek.
That's your Star Trek.
And for me, it was, and as I think it was for all of us here tonight, it was the original series. Me, I was, I'm watching on a crappy little black and white TV in my room, and I know what the color of the uniforms are because I've seen color, like I've gotten books with color photos, like the making of Star Trek, and there's like, you know, but you know, it's I mean, listen, you're looking at it now, and there's some stuff that's painfully. You're like, they had a clipboard with like this special, like when Kirk would be given something to sign, and it was paper, and there was a little light on top for whatever because it's spacey, I guess. You know, but you know, of course, they had no idea that the idea of a data pad or an iPad or you know anything like that had not even been dreamt of.
Although it's funny because when people throw Star Trek out there and say it inspired the design of a lot of existing technology,
it did.
That cardboard thing or wooden box, basically, you know, a lot of people say, well, yeah, that's the very beginning of the idea of a pad.
We saw them, and it was PADD in Next Gen. Remember, they would have little thing, you know, these pads, and you know, they'd be like showing you, like, all right, here's the data on this, you know, and they were, you know, iPads ahead of their time, because a lot of people who love Star Trek became engineers. Which is why we got flip phones. You know, flip phones are very much, you know, old school communicator style. Pads inspired the iPad and other, you know, and other tablets.
And while we had Craig Lubin here last night, he's off being a father, taking his daughter to see the D&D movie tonight. That's why he's not here tonight. But I am sure we would have his remarks on this as an engineer. But yeah. So listen, guys, we're believe it or not, almost at the end of the program.
We actually haven't discussed what happened to Jack, unless
and I think we should. That's what I was going to jump back to. Yeah, I mean, okay, so he does go, and he uses his link to try to figure out where he needs to go, and then he gets there, and then what? There's a transwarp conduit.
Yeah, which brings him to the Borg cube. He beams on board, and he has this like very salty conversation with the Borg Queen, who was voiced by Alice Krieg, who did the Borg Queen in First Contact, which I was delighted to hear her voice again.
Yes.
And she's like, you know, I've come up with many names for you. Like, and he gives a couple of, you know, one which was, you know, the child of God, and the other one was Rebirth. Is I'm neither of those, you know, showing he's a well-educated rogue, and he shows off his knowledge of Latin.
Right.
And basically, she's like, you look at, like, he looks so angry. I think because he felt like he's been fucked around with his whole life.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And she's like, if you were going to kill me, if you could kill me, you would have already done it.
Right.
And his resistance is futile, and like these tentacles come out and start injecting themselves. And you get to see all the, like, you know, black sort of, you know, whether they're circuits or blood patterns under the
tendrils
skin.
Yeah, right.
And he is taken over, presumably. And in fact, I believe they used him to initiate the assimilation of all the junior officers on the fleet.
I think
because
so.
There was like a weird, like, you know, thrum of energy and sound, and that's when everything started going to hell. And we got to see this interior of what looked like Borg tech, you know, weirdly biomechanical, although I guess not really considering the source. But it was like this, almost like if V'ger was a Borg, it would have been like, you know, like that. There's a lot of, you know, incomprehensible machinery moving about.
Right.
And I think he fulfilled his purpose for this Borg Changeling Alliance, although I question how long in the line, like if they were like, assuming they were successful, which I don't think they will be, because
they've already lost. They just don't know it yet.
There you go, Keith.
But like, at what point would one of them turn on the other, or would they simultaneously try to turn on each other?
Well, and my thought is we got to hear from Queen Pill, you know, and Queen Girardi, and I can't help but think they're going to need more than the Enterprise D.
I agree.
You know, and somebody's got to come in and help them out, and I would think it would be Girardi, but
that would at least, I don't want to say at least, that would justify her whole arc from the previous season.
Yes.
I'm not justify, but it would pay it
off.
off.
But it would tie it in. It would bookend it nicely.
Yeah.
I agree.
So yeah, that would be, because they were petitioning to join the Federation.
Right.
So that is, clearly that hasn't happened yet.
Well, clearly it hasn't, because I think the minute that they realized the Borg was at the heart of this, somebody would have said, well, wait a minute. And nobody said that.
Yeah.
I think is interesting. That bothered me a little bit, that nobody sat there and said, well, wait a minute. It's the Borg, but what happened to,
if you say what
Girardi's
I think,
Borg?
If you're saying what I think, presumably if you're saying what I think you're saying, yes.
Angela says, bring on the good Borg.
So,
yeah.
Presumably the changeling infiltration of Starfleet has been going on for a while now.
Right.
Which would mean even back in last season, in season 2 of Picard, they would have been in key positions most likely back then, which means they would have had the power to slow walk Girardi's application to the Federation, because I'm willing to bet she would have been able to detect the Borg presence in the transporter.
I would also argue that, despite Picard's recommendation for them to join the Federation, presumably he would do that.
Right.
Even with that, I'm sure there's enough, as we've seen with Captain Shaw, there are a lot of people who, they've got long memories about the Borg, and I'm sure they're like, Borg in the Federation. Yeah, not while I draw breath.
Yeah, right.
So I'm sure even if changelings weren't, making things more difficult, which they probably would, I'm quite certain there's enough hard feelings amongst Starfleet and the Federation that they would not be in any big hurry.
I would think that what might cinch it for them will be what happens next if they show up.
Right.
So
I would like to see them show up. I'm like, they've got this 35-year-old starship, which is which was once top of the line, now not so much. Although that's a very movie and TV conceit, the idea of using old tech to defeat new tech.
Right.
I only watched bits of it. There's the Battleship movie where they, these aliens are invading, and like the new top of the line naval ships are all messed up, but there's still an old World War II battleship, like in the harbor that they can, it's like a museum, but it's still operating, and they use that because it can't be, I guess, compromised because it's all analog. And Geordi rather charmingly refers to the Enterprise D as analog, which is the complete opposite of analog.
Yeah, right.
But it is not.
I think analog may have a different meaning at that point.
I think it's because it is not tied into the whole collective business.
Well, let's face it, Leo. The entire reboot, I think maybe even the original of Battlestar Galactica, was based on that premise.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. That the Battlestar Galactica was old tech and was fought at a time when they realized they couldn't link all their computers together because it could be compromised. So, that's what they did. So yeah, it's you're right. It's a science fiction conceit, and it's been around for a while.
But listen, none of it bothers me. I love seeing them all at their old posts.
Yeah,
it's a delight. It's a delight to see them all.
I liked the two data lines. I liked number one when he goes, "Hello, chair," which I thought was great, and the other one, which was marvelous, was when Geordi says to him, "You could be a little bit more positive," and then with a big shit-eating smile, he says, "I hope we die easily." Yeah, He had
that was a great moment because, again, not quite. He'd be like, "Huh, well, here's a comforting thought, maybe."
Yeah.
He's still finding his way.
Yeah.
Either that or he's kind of fucking with me.
I think of that. There's a little bit of
with
that.
him.
I
was
think there
fucking
is.
with him.
Yeah.
I think he was fucking with him.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't even want to. I don't know if bothers me is the right word, but it's just like I'm still having a hard time buying an alliance between the changelings and the Borg. You just gotta know the changelings have got to be smart enough to know that that's not going to end well.
Oh, listen, much like Russia and Hitler aligning, because Hitler, I don't think the Russians were going to backstab Germany, but fucking Hitler, was like, at the drop of a hat, decided to invade Russia in the winter, which was maybe the stupidest. I wouldn't want to visit Russia in the winter, let alone try to take it over. But I do question that's what I said. It's like, how quickly, if they were successful, how quickly would they turn on each other? And I think the answer is immediately.
Well, and here's the other question. I want to be a fly on the wall for that meeting. I mean, the Borg shows up to anyone and automatically says, we're going to assimilate you. So how did that meeting come to place? I mean, how did come to pass? I mean, how did that?
Well, could a Borg, and all right, here's a nerd question.
Yeah.
Because the changelings are essentially fluid, they don't really have much in the way of, well done, yes. Much in the way of internal organs, except apparently now they do. But even those are, could a changeling be assimilated by a Borg? By the Borg?
It's interesting because we saw in Prodigy, we saw Zero being he was assimilated briefly by the Borg. And Medusans are pure energy creatures. I'm not quite sure how they would assimilate a species that is not, physical. I mean, even though the changelings are physical, but the only thing they have in common is they're both sort of a hive mind.
Right. And it is true that I don't know how easily Borg nanoprobes could latch into something that's fluid like that. I don't know. It just seems.
Which means the Borg would then, we can't assimilate you. Okay, fine. We'll exterminate you then. I mean, that would be the Borg. That would be the Borg pattern. So
yeah, I know.
Again, I don't see these guys if they were successful, which I think is unlikely, unless that's the end of the franchise. It's like, and the galaxy is plunged into darkness, which seems unlikely.
Yeah.
But even if they were successful, neither one of these are super trustworthy allies.
Right.
Let's call them bad actors.
Yeah. My only thing is, I'm sorry we don't have 12 episodes to watch, because I think it would be interesting to see a little more than whatever we'll be able to cram into one episode with Jack and the Borg Queen. So that's my only concern for next week. I feel like, again, there's not quite as much to wrap up as we had last season in the last episode, but I would probably like to see a little bit more than an hour or 47 minutes, whatever it is, worth.
Yeah, there were a lot of plates in the air at the end of last season. They all
there were
rather quickly. I'm hoping they don't wrap everything up too quickly, because that'll be unsatisfying, and I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I don't either.
I'm always in favor of more Trek, so I can't disagree with that assessment.
Right.
Although it comes from a selfish place of
right.
But as somebody once pointed out, because it did feel like, there are only 2 episodes left. How are they going to sort of tie everything up? And what we've essentially got is a movie, like a movie length, because it's about 2 hours worth of content, which is about the size of a movie.
Jealous.
We are so
Jealous.
jealous of Angela. She's looking forward to seeing the last episode in IMAX.
Yeah, that's their. I tried to get that, but that site crashed, and it was like, spinning wheel, then bad gateway, and I'm like, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
I will watch it on my my non-IMAX TV. But I will enjoy it nevertheless.
Yes. I'm sure I'll be laying in my bed watching it like I do pretty much every week at 3 o'clock in the morning.
But
I gotta say, last night I watched it. It was like 2:30, and it was all of a sudden I saw it was in there, and I put it on, finished watching it, and just wrote to Leo, well.
Yes.
And I think Leo wrote back to me, indeed.
Yes. One thing, just a little. This is just like a slight nerd note, is that notice the phaser that Jack was wielding or had is very reminiscent of a TOS phaser, although not exactly.
It was. Yes, it was. I noticed that too, and it sort of stuck out to me for a second. I liked it.
I am a big fan of the original series phasers.
Right.
I must confess, I'm not a big fan of the Dustbuster design.
No, I'm not either.
From TOS.
Right.
They also seem like it would be harder to aim that.
Yeah.
But I thought that the original phaser design from TOS was a very elegant, functional design and didn't need to be improved.
So let me ask you this, Leo, because I noticed it too. What is your thought about that prop placement? Did that come from someone?
It feels like something he picked up along the way, like before the start of the series.
Right.
And it seems like the kind of thing like he might have lifted it from someone.
Well, it's especially fun for me because in our Star Trek Adventures campaign, I play Captain Jack Walker, and Jack had an affinity for TOS style stuff and had an old phaser communicator and tricorder on display in his ready room. So yeah, that stuff. And it was the Triton, not the Titan.
Yes.
Yeah. But at any rate, so yeah, that I just was wondering. I had that same thought.
I think it's a definitely because he has almost like this slightly old school vibe. Like he's sort of like a bit of a scrounger. I mean, it looks like more advanced than a it wasn't a one-to-one replica, but it had the little cone, like that thin cone at the end, and that sort of I don't want to say humped top, but a bit of like a curve to it.
Yeah, it falls somewhere between the motion picture phaser and the TOS phaser. So somewhere in there. Yeah, unless it's.
And I think it was. I want to say it was the phaser from Wrath of Khan, or the sort of middle period of TOS films. They had some really cool phasers. There's one that was all black, and it had that. It didn't have the detachable phaser one in it, but it was very cool.
Right. I just remember the motion picture phaser, and I thought it was Wrath of Khan, where it was basically that silver. It's still the same shape, basic shape, but it was just a silver.
It might be. It's been a while. They had one that was all black, which it might have been from.
Well, listen, we're talking about after Picard possibly doing a series on the motion pictures, so we can look at weapons.
Yeah, we can do a deep dive into that.
Definitely. All right, guys. I predicted we would probably run over today. Is there anything else that you guys want to comment on before we set ourselves up for the final episode?
Like I said, they really, as Keith said, the bad guys have lost it. They don't know yet. But I did as much. I do have a lot of affection for the Next Generation, even if the D is not my favorite of the Enterprises.
Right.
But I did feel like it felt so appropriate to have them end the episode on the bridge of the Enterprise D, engage everything. It felt like coming home, and that's sort of, and it was very important that both 7 and 9 and Rafi were left on the Titan. I don't know. I hope nothing bad happens. I don't think they're going to kill them off.
Right.
But I think it was important to have the old crew together for that last for the last installment.
Right.
So
right. Yeah, it's going to be exciting, guys. How about you, Keith? Anything? Any parting words, my friend?
You know what? I am just looking forward to seeing the bad guys lose because I'm sorry, you can stick a fork in it. This plot is done. They just aren't aware of it yet.
Yeah.
I do kind of like the plot that the bad guys did have, this inserting bit of genetic code into people through use of the transporters. I think it is a plot that I wish I had come up with for my Star Trek Adventures game when I'm GMing that.
Well, like I said, I knew I really felt in my gut it was the Borg, but that the technology was something we hadn't seen before, and that's exactly what we got. We got new Borg tech, and again, there's a line in it, and I don't want to go down a whole rabbit hole because we are running now 11 minutes over, but she does. Somebody says we haven't heard from the Borg in 10 years.
I think Beverly said that.
Right. Now, but they have, because how long ago was season 2?
Presumably not 10 years.
That's what I'm thinking.
And they might not be counting those as Borg.
Maybe.
Yeah, again, we don't. I'm not sure how wide of knowledge that is. That these
That's true.
Alternate timeline Borg showed up.
Yeah.
However, it does sort of line up with, because and it's what I've read, and I've never I'm confessing to me, I've never finished Voyager, and I do want to go back and finish it. Right. I lost track of it when it was on the air, and I just never.
Yeah.
But now with Paramount Plus, I can go back and finish it. But apparently, Janeway did some sort of shenanigans which crippled the Borg and kept them in the Delta Quadrant.
Right.
From what I understand.
Right.
So,
I think you're right.
That is why the Borg have not been making any incursions further in, because they've been hamstrung, so to speak.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So.
All right, guys. I think I'm going to roll us out of here. But hey, folks, if you for some reason have stumbled across this program and it's new to you, know that we're going to be continue to bring Trek related things to you beyond Picard, and make sure that you like and subscribe. Yes, and hit the bell to let yourself know whenever we have a new installment. Sometimes we might pop something new on there that's out of the normal Thursday schedule. So that would let you know that. Yes. So at any rate, and also please do check out our Patreon page. And if you would be so kind to be able to, and you have the means, it would be wonderful to get your financial support as well as your viewership support. At any rate, okay, guys. Keith.
Next week, big panel show.
Oh, that's right. I should have mentioned it. But Keith, I do want to thank you for being on tonight.
You're most welcome.
Great to have you here. And yes, next week, we are going to have a panel show. And the finale this was suggested actually to us by Angela. In which we are going to have many of our guest hosts from this season on Picard all in one big show.
Yes.
So that should be a lot of fun, something very different for us. We've never done anything like that before. So please tune in next week to see either how great an idea it is or what a disaster it becomes. And we will see you all then. Folks, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.
And we will see you next week at 8 p.m. on Thursday.
Yep. And
there we go. And there's Penny.